Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who is joining us today. From wherever you might be joining us in the world, we're so pleased that you have decided to spend the next 45 minutes to an hour together with us in this A Taste of SPI, the Summer Peacebuilding Institute webinar. My name is Corey Schaefer. I am the Director of Programs here at the Center for Justice of Peacebuilding, and it is my delight to be able to share this time with you and to welcome our special guest, Catherine Barnes. Let's see. Before we get started, a few details about today's webinar and about the Summer Peacebuilding Institute. This webinar series, which we are playfully calling A Taste of SPI, is designed to give you a preview of the Summer Peacebuilding Institute experience. These short and interactive sessions offer a chance to sample our courses, to meet our instructors, and to engage with the questions and practices and approaches to learning that define the Summer Peacebuilding Institute. So whether you're deciding to join us for the first time or you're trying to figure out what course you want to take at this year's Institute, we're so thankful that you're here. And today we will be focusing on the course Facilitating Conflict Transformation, Working with Fire. And this is going to be offered by Catherine Barnes. Before we get started and welcome Catherine to the stage, I'm going to share with you a short video. It's about 3.5 minutes, and it's a bit of a look into what is the vibe and the feel from the Summer Peacebuilding Institute. This video was taken at last year's Summer Peacebuilding Institute, and you'll hear from a few folks who joined us and what they thought. Once this video is over, then we will move into our webinar, formal portion of the webinar where you get to learn a lot more about Catherine, about this course, and what does working with fire mean.
So to me, SPI is where people from all around. So to me, SPI is a place where people from all around the world can come together who are interested in learning and networking with each other to share stories and skills and to come together and learn about how to build peace in our communities, in ourselves, our families, and in systems of injustice.
It's just powerful. It is really powerful to be in a place where people ultimately share the same goal of a more just and peaceful world. That's a really powerful thing to be a part of.
When you come to FPI, if you're a practitioner, regardless of where you're from and regardless of sort of what your work includes, you feel like you're not alone. Participants will say, this is my place, this is my people, because people understand what I'm talking about. People understand me and I don't have to explain. And so this idea of, we don't share everything, we don't share a language even often, but when we're talking about conflict, we're talking about trying to make change happen in constructive ways and in positive ways.
Why I find SPI valuable is that I get to see multiple perspectives when I come here. I get to see people from other countries that I don't see in my normal life. And I also get to experience the curriculum of very, very different ways of dealing in the world, like the peace building, the conflict analysis, and have conversations that I don't have in my day-to-day life as a faculty member.
There aren't so many places where we get to really connect, reflect, get a little more honest with ourselves, maybe learn more from each other than we can in a typical academic or even a typical public kind of engagement situation.
There's a lot more to SPI than just the courses. First of all, it attracts really fantastic people who are looking to do good in the world and who are looking to build community.
Everybody you meet on the road of EMU, the Eastern Mennonite University, is so friendly. I tell you, this place reminds me of Africa. This place reminds me of my community. Eastern Mennonite University is a place that I have been able to bond with several people.
I experienced a tremendous sense of welcome, not just when I arrived, but throughout my time here. I felt like I was loved before I came here, that the space, that the courses, that the care materials were all prepared for me, for this learning community in a very intentional, loving way.
Don't miss out. You have to come. It is truly a unique place. It is an incubator, it is a networking space, and there's a lot that we learn and grow together here.
All right. So once again, for any new folks who have joined us, we welcome you. We thank you for spending this time with us. And without further ado, I welcome Dr. Catherine Barnes, who is here to share about her course at this year's Summer Peacebuilding Institute, Facilitating Conflict Transformation and Working with Fire, which will run from June 8th to June 12th. At the end of today's talk, we'll share some more information about how you can register or how you can find some more information. Right now, we'd love to hear from you, Catherine, about what you're envisioning, imagining for this summer's time together.
Wonderful. Corey, thank you so much. I must admit, looking at that video, it made me all excited again. I was really captivated. And I think it really does capture a lot of the spirit and also this notion that people, when they come, they're coming because in a way it's really activating some deep need that they have to sort of figure out, like, how do we deal with the deepest challenging work possible in the world today, and somehow coming together, and the relief a lot of times people feel like, oh, there's others too. And then also I think the video captured really well the spirit of creativity and fun that we try to cultivate. So beautiful. Thank you so much for starting us in that way. Yeah.
See you a little bit later back on the stage. But I agree with you. And we have a saying at SPI that peace builders feed the world in the work that we do and the hope that we provide and the change that we make happen. So peace builders feed the world, and at SPI we feed the peace builders.
Yeah,
we do that literally and in so many deeper ways too. So.
Tasty and nutritious food in feasting. Yes, feasting.
Absolutely. All right, Catherine, handing it over to you.
Great. Okay. Wonderful. And maybe just a word or two about myself. So Catherine Barnes, and I have been involved in this facilitation world and especially, actually, I want to say really uniquely about facilitating processes that are intended to work in transforming conflict for about 35 years. And I have worked in really large scale formal settings, the UN, large, institutional ones. I've worked in war to peace transitions. I've also worked in communities very recently, or in a number of years now, addressing racial justice and healing in my community in Virginia, culture war conflicts over schools, and then also working with coalitions, activist movements, organizations that are seeking to promote change. And yet, within those spaces, we so often find that tensions and conflicts and divisions appear, and yet people want to work in ways that heal them. So this class is going to be in a particular kind of intersection where we are a lot of facilitation work kind of teaches ways of managing conflict that may come up as almost like an externality that has to be managed so that the group can work towards its purpose. This class is going to be really focusing much more specifically in which working with conflict is the purpose of the process. And what does that then mean in terms of our process designs? How does facilitators show up in holding those spaces? So during the class, we'll be, in a lot of ways, working with three particular dimensions. First, how do you prepare yourself to be able to hold space for the group to engage with conflict constructively? What is the inner journey that we as facilitators need to continually be on and to be cultivating? Secondly, how do we work with those from across a conflict system to co-convene, co-design a process that they own that is centered in helping them to develop ways of transforming their conflict? And then thirdly, what are the specific process functions and methods that we can use in supporting that? So in today's webinar, I'm going to talk through some of those. In the class itself, we will mostly be doing this learning experientially and then reflecting on what it is that we are learning from experiencing different process methods. Today, I'm going to really present a little bit more formally with a PowerPoint presentation, some of the big ideas that we'll be exploring. So Corey, can you help get that up? Great. Okay. And just to say, this SPI at Eastern Mennonite University is in the Shenandoah Valley. And the land, this is a picture that you can see not far from here, is where kind of Corey and I both are from, our homeland, and the degree to which this space itself of the land helps to hold and to ground a lot. For me, this is a really big part of doing this work, is being grounded in the land, touching the earth. And so I just thought that image is in a way to amplify that point. So I remember, Corey, you asked me early on, this title of Working with Fire, what do you mean by that? And I think in a lot of ways, we need to think about conflict as emerging, both, in a very basic way, when people perceive they have incompatible goals, and that perception of incompatibility affects how they perceive each other, their attitudes towards each other, and the way in which they act with each other. We also know, along with that, part of that perceiving each other and acting is the emotions and the narratives and the perceptions that people have of each other. And sometimes that can get into either a very stuck place, very rigid ways of thinking and seeing, and sometimes even being silenced, especially when a conflict has been embedded in a system where everything just gets kind of repressed down below, or else a very explosive and sometimes very understandable efforts to try to unsettle things by kind of like dumping lots of emotion and energy. So I think what we are looking at in these processes is, in a way, enabling the fire to be present, because that helps to move away the stuckness in the old stuff and helps that transformative energy while creating conditions in which people don't get burnt. So how do we work with it? I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But once again, very much intentionally and explicitly working with conflict and in ways that are life-giving. So part of that, what we need as facilitators in doing that, is to be able to be fully present with the group during those times and processes. And sometimes it is like, you are riding a wave and you need to get on that wave and feel how you can flow it. And sometimes it is just moving very smoothly through. But a lot of times as facilitators, we need to somehow stay in a modality in which we are a non-anxious presence helping to ground the group. Because especially in cases where there is a lot of emotion, a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, maybe there's been a history of harm and trauma, we need to be able to regulate our nervous system so that we can stay present and be paying attention to what is going on and being in service of the group. So we will be focusing on how to cultivate those qualities of the inner journey so that we can sustain that presence and be of service to the group. Because a lot of times what we are doing is we are not directing, we are not controlling, we are not pushing for particular outcomes, we are really holding. We are holding that change so that that which is growing, which has its own life force, as this like a little image of a baby, can do the development that it needs to happen. And sometimes that's really tumultuous, and sometimes it is just really peaceful, and how to create that loving container. So while those are a certain kind of psychic and emotional and energetic quality we bring, there is also a strategic and technical skill aspect that we need to work on. So throughout the course, we'll be looking both at theories of change, the strategic level thinking about why would a group want to engage in a process and what purpose would it be serving? How would it help to bring about transformative change? What role does dialogue have for the group? But we will also be exploring theories of practice, which is, okay, so a group is exploring a dialogue and we are going to be helping work with the group. How do we do that work in the most responsive and adaptive and skillful way possible? And there's often a lot of underlying principles that are present that help us to create conditions in which that can happen. Within any particular methodology, within any particular technique, there are principles and qualities underlying it. And we want to be reflecting on and learning what are those principles, because then we can adapt. Much like going back to that food metaphor that Corey was mentioning, if you were learning to cook, you might initially just use a very, very specific recipes from a recipe book, and you kind of mechanically follow the procedures and add the ingredients and the quantities that they're going. And you can make a very nice cake. But if you understand the underlying principles, if you don't have certain ingredients or you have a preference for changing the taste in some other way, you can know what is it that you could change, what can you work with in order to do something that's really adapted for what's available and what is appropriate for that context. So a lot of our attention is going to be on exploring, experiencing, debriefing, and articulating the theories of practice so that then we can be skillful in playing with process design as we go along. And process design in general is often, again, about cultivation rather than control. How do we help to create the conditions, working with what is, and being able to respond and adapt to what is happening in the context? And so that notion of cultivation is going to go throughout the process, but especially in the process design stage. Along with that, we need to always have attention to the dynamics of power and the risk of doing harm with the process. And I think that we sometimes, there can be a temptation for some people to think like, oh, dialogue is always good, or it can always be fine. And yet what we know in practice is that especially when there has been systems of harm, systems of oppression, we need to kind of see what in the process, by the way it's designed, by the who is present, what are the questions asked, what are the methods used, how is it helping to address power asymmetries, and how, as a facilitator, as a process designers, we can help to bring that explicitly into the room. And this quote by Ulrich Beck, I think, is one that becomes a little bit of a North Star for me, which is that whenever nobody is talking about power, and I think here we're talking more about the power over coercive form of power, and whenever nobody is talking about power, it almost unquestionably exists, at once secure and great in its unquestionability. Whenever power is the subject of discussion, that is the start of its decline, or at least the start of the decline of that power over. So one of the roles that if we are going to work with conflict faithfully, a lot of times it is one of the things that we need to be able to do is to bring that into the conversation, be mindful of it, and help the group itself work through those dynamics so that we can get into right relationship and hopefully channel a way of transforming that into more cooperative forms of power. A lot of this begins upstream. I see the formatting kind of got lost in this slide. My apologies. When When we are talking about process design and we're talking about doing it together with those in conflict, we need to kind of work in ways of figuring out how the different elements of things that are going on and the different people can kind of come together into crafting a process that is co-owned and is responsive to people's different needs. And one of the things that you often see as soon as you start working with people in the upstream stages of talking about, like, what do we end up doing? People have very different ways of framing what is going on in a conflict and what is needed to address it. So we have to be, a lot of times in my experience of doing this at its best, is working in partnership with a core group, a convening group from across the system who collaboratively end up helping to both convene and to co-design as we work forward, and then moving outwards from there and talking with others who are in that conflict system through a process of inquiry, of asking them questions. Well, what do you perceive as going on in this system? What do you think others are perceiving? What would be core questions for you? What are the core conditions in which you would need if this were to be able to address the divergent needs and views and values? And that consultative assessment process not only begins the people's kind of beginning to be reflective about what is going on and have some sense of how dialogic process might come together to start to make shifts. It also helps to start laying the foundation of trust that you are able, you as convener, you as facilitator, are able to take their concerns seriously, be responsive to them, and then create something out of it that they are willing to take hold of. From within that process of a convening group and consultative assessment, as a process designer, need to really both assess that context need. And so those of you who do conflict analysis will know how important that analysis phase is. Out of that, then to articulate a very clear purpose. What is the purpose of the dialogue? What should come out of it? What are the objectives? And then to design the process of what that could, what would be needed in terms of process methods in order for that to happen. And a lot of times that involves a lot of reframing what the conflict is, sometimes linking very deeply into the basic human needs people have and are finding ways of having values that seem to be contradictory to both be acknowledged and honored in the framing of the process itself. So within that, in terms of methods, a lot of times I think of there being sort of three main functions that can often happen in a dialogical process for addressing conflict. First of all, there is dialogue itself. And I'm going to use a slightly more technical definition of this, drawing on Pruitt and Thomas, which is thinking about deep dialogue as being those times in which people come together and are able to share stories, reflect on their own authentic points of view, to speak to their values, to articulate what are their interests that are motivating them in a situation, so that people can begin to understand each other and have the understanding that is needed to have a shared sense making of what is going on in the system. And out of that, cultivating a level of respect and hopefully building sufficient trust. People are willing to continue to work together, as well as beginning that process of having a shared understanding of what is at the heart of the matter in the situation they face. Dialogue, that kind of dialogue in itself is often not enough, because a lot of times there are actual issues that need to be addressed, problems that need to be worked through, so as to have people have some kind of an equitable change and an outcome. This is where deliberation happens. If dialogue is more kind of like a matter of the heart, deliberation is often a matter of the rational analytic mind, in which people can engage in really robust analysis, fact-finding, option generation, weighing through trade-offs, and kind of developing a reasoned and well-informed judgment, both around are the issues going on and what might be some paths forward to address them. Then in some cases, many cases, there may be that the group has the mandate to make a decision about how they should move forward together. This often gets really tricky. And what I'm going to be coming back on in a few minutes is that having clarity around how is a decision going to be made, by whom, through what method, can be really important to making sure that the process itself is robust and that there's clear outcomes and a clear path forward after the process is through. So consensus building can be really critical for that. Now, not every process will have dialogue, deliberation, and decision making, but you can see that these are three distinct functions. So I'll go into each of them a little bit more detail. So dialogue, even before you begin, and especially if it's a dialogue process, a lot of times this is where the working with fire comes into play. You may be familiar with the alchemists of old who would have this kind of sense that if they could combine the right elements together and heat them up, transformation could happen and gold would emerge. Now, whether that ever literally happened or not, I think that is often what we are working towards. And so a lot of times as dialogue facilitators, we talk about how to create the container in which people can feel that they're sufficiently held, that the conditions are such that they feel safe enough to speak from their heart and go right into what is at the heart of the matter for them, as well as to listen to others and have that heat emerge that is needed for change, and yet it be contained. That's the thing, is like the alchemist container was always able to withstand the heat. And so our process methods, and there's lots of dimensions to that, we will cover and explore in the course of how to do that. Lots of considerations there. When we get into the dialogue itself, often we are talking about how to invite people to share stories, to connect their concerns with their life experiences. And this lovely phrase about the shortest distance between two people is a story. Once we hear stories and we feel that we are able to speak our story and to have it be heard and listened to, often that is a form of not only allowing our authentic voice to come through and to be respected and to feel our dignity can be upheld, but also it becomes an acknowledgement of our core being. And in turn, if we are able to extend that acknowledgement to others, it creates a foundation in which people can begin to start the process of developing a relationship on a new basis. But there's another aspect of this dialogue phrase and the story thing of connecting your views and values with experiences in your lives, is that you're activating the narratives that are at the heart of our meaning-making processes. And when we listen to how people tell their stories, how they explain why it is they think what they think, they believe what they believe, they feel what they feel, they want what it is they want, we can begin to have that meaning making together and to do the shared meaning making that becomes essential to get out of kind of very rigid binary thinking into complexifying. It is also the time in which the dangers of the single story, as Indigo Adichie Cello has spoken, can be addressed, in which people whose stories may have been suppressed systemically in the context are able to speak that and help to balance some of the power of the hegemonic narratives that may be present in the dominant culture. So this dialogue experience is often cultivating conditions for that. We also often in dialogue processes intentionally engage with the legacies of the past. Sometimes, and I think often, in my experience, very powerfully, almost a historic past, like even before we were born. How did our system evolve into the way it is today? Because often, if we have some shared understanding of the past, what are the deeper patterns that we see continually going forward? What were some of those moments, historical turning points that choices were made, which set the trajectory for where we are right now? It then also provides an opportunity for, instead of thinking that everything that happened in the past is the only thing that's ever possible in the future, we end up having a greater sense of freedom, of being able to have agency in making different choices, in disrupting old destructive patterns, in creating something new. One of my favorite methods for doing this, and we will experience it some in the class, although it won't be quite the same because we won't all be in a system together, is developing shared timelines of the past history and then using those as the basis of discussion, of dialogue, and inviting kind of counter narratives to come into the fore. Another process that when we start to begin to shift is to begin to do the intentional cultivation of deliberation, how to think better together. And I'm going to just speak to this, not so much from the methodologies, but because we will be experiencing a lot of methodologies for doing so, but three kind of guiding observations that I think become core to the process of shifting out of habitual way of thinking and doing something more constructive. One, of course, is the Einstein quote that we can't solve our problems with the same level of thinking that generated them. We have to get beneath and have a new way of testing the old assumptions and thinking generatively outside of the existing paradigm about new ways forward. A second is around Thomas Kuhn. The answers you get depend on the questions you ask. And I think a lot of the power that often comes in process design and facilitation is asking powerful questions. And how do we craft those questions in ways that can invite profoundly new, novel, and more responsive ways of thinking about the situation and new possibilities of way forward. And as we begin to look in towards, okay, so what do we do? How do we move forward? Doyle and Strauss's observations that you can't agree on a solution if you don't agree on the problem. So a lot of our deliberation methods are about helping to develop a shared framework for understanding what is the nature of the situations we are facing and what do we need to take into account if we're going to change it. So in that sense, a lot of our methods are enabling us to diverge from our current habitual ways of thinking, coming up with lots of ideas and options, allowing them out there, allowing them to kind of like bounce off, brainstorm, generate new ways of thinking, and then taking the time to think, to talk the things through, letting them cook together so that something new begins to emerge. And then slowly out of that, a process of converging, drawing conclusions about what matters and what we might want to do next becomes crucial for that. Alongside of that, one of the methods we'll be exploring is one of the things that we sometimes realize is at the heart of our conflicts are polarities. Now, this is not the same as polarization, socio-political polarization. Polarities tend to be values that seem to be in contradiction, are often the source of conflict, such as, some valuing unity, whereas others wanting self-determination. Some valuing the traditional the traditions of the community that hold the communal identity intact. Others wanting the freedom for self-expression and moving forward. If we get to an understanding through our dialogue and deliberations, if there are these polarities, polarity and management is a process of helping us understanding how those values are often interdependent and moving beyond either or to thinking both and. What are some of the ways in which we can work towards increasing the upsides of both values instead of being locked in the downsides of them both. So another part of a process method that we'll work with deliberation. Finally, we move into the decision-making processes, and I'm not going to talk much more about those there, except to say that having a really robust way of doing that decision-making helps, and that throughout that, doing consensus building. How do we address and frame like very specific issues and then turn that into integrative solutions so that we can actually resolve those things that are problems and incompatible goals and figure out, okay, so how do we move forward together that respects and satisfies the core interests, needs, and values of everybody? Finally, one of the things that we will also be looking at is, we can imagine probably quite easily how to do it when everybody is in a room together and it's quite small and everybody's face to face. How do we scale up these processes? This is one of the processes that I led with the Mennonite Church USA in their Future Church Summit. You can see here, this was about 750 people in a room. So we can indeed scale these things up, especially enabled by technology. And I'm really excited to say that I think that we'll be joined by half a day with Dr. Lisa Shirk, who has been really on the cutting edge of a whole new class of technologies called deliberative technologies that enable us to even bring these deliberative processes beyond people who are in a room together and actually scaling them up to population level scales. And I think that for those of us who are working on polarization or addressing like contentious policymaking issues, this will give us a whole new way of working. And how do we do all these other principles that we've been learning about dialogue and deliberation and decision making using these new technologies? So I think that we're going to be able to do that together. And once again, throughout, we will be exploring what are the qualities as a facilitator that you yourself want to cultivate? What are your intentions? What is it that you want to cultivate? And lots of time for reflection, for sharing, for thinking together about that so that you can both have experienced methods for doing that, but also setting your intentions. And this is that old phrase about where your intention is, your I-N-T-E. Intention is where your attention goes, where your energy flows, what you pay attention to, what you will cultivate. So I think that is enough for me now. I'd like to open things up if there's questions, discussion, things that people would like to say. No particular exercises for today's webinar, but do want to have a chance for discussion.
Thank you, Catherine. I appreciate, and there was some comments about appreciating the slides and visuals that you use to depict this overarching framework and process that you're working within. So thank you for sharing this with us today.
Wonderful.
And yeah, as you mentioned, for those of us who are joining and watching live, please use the comment section to add any questions or remarks or thoughts that may have been stimulated by what Catherine has shared or that you might have for us about SPI in general.
Mm-hmm. And including if you have experiences that you would also like to add, that's fine too.
Yeah. I see one from Patty noting that she's not able to come in person to EMU, but has been joining a few of our webinars and then looking for books by our instructors that might be good. So Catherine, any books by you and or Lisa that that you might recommend for someone interested in the work?
Yeah, well, actually, Patty, thank you. And I'm sorry you won't be able to join us. Both of us do. I think for me, actually, ironically enough, I am working on one with Lisa right now. And we'll have a whole series of also short papers that are presenting a lot of these ideas that are going to be published in the next few months. And that will be with the TODA Institute for Peace, which is the Japanese Peace Foundation. And we're working right now, I think it's going to come through with the Cambridge University Press book. But I think that there are lots of different books. I mean, a lot of my stuff has been more on war to peace processes and on kind of how to have ownership of peacemaking with civil society participation. So I'm not sure if that's quite what you're looking for. I must admit, I've been so much doing this practice of facilitation that I'm only just now starting to write about it. But if you do like a Google search, you may be able to find, and also all of my stuff is on my website, which is catherinebarnes.space. So sorry for a little plug there, but I've all the PDFs I've put on there. Yeah.
So Austin asks and references some other courses that you teach here at the Center for Peace, Catherine, both your facilitation practices course and then your designing processes. Can you speak to what would be unique about working with fire and this SPI course for anyone in those other courses in the past?
Yeah. Hi, Austin. And thank you. Yeah, I think it will have definitely some similar themes and methods, although not so much because this is not intended as a starting facilitation course. And it's really assuming people, and I think that is important to add, it's assuming people have some grounding in group processes and basic facilitation skills, because we will not be addressing those in this course. But there is I think one of the things that's a difference is like, where do you focus? And this one is going to be using some of those principles, but really digging into what do you do when there's conflict? What does it look like? What does it feel like? How do we both be very attentive to that and cultivate in like designing the processes? Where are some of the pit fields? Where are some of the those things that we need to be really aware of, and what would be some of those things that we want to cultivate if we're explicitly working with fire. So if you've just done PAC 610, I would probably actually recommend that you take another class, because it may feel a little bit too close, but it is it's like the intention is a little different. And so I think the conversations, the experiences that we have will be different. And also will be some things that will cover it a little bit differently. Yeah.
Thank you. So Paul Evans, who's joining us from Costa Rica, asked, if you bring different parties together to do conflict transformation work and are working with fire, what are the first sentences you use to begin the process?
Okay. Welcome. Thank you, Paul. I think, a lot of that is going to depend so much in the context. And once again, I think a lot of that is going to be shaped by what happened in that upstream work of that co-creation, that co-ingration. So all those conversations that you have already had with people is going to attune you more into what those opening words are going to be. I remember a process that I was working with that was very much around culture war conflicts, actually in our community. And Corey, you had a chance to be a part of it. And the very first one, when we were really convening a core group of people, in that one, and this was very much culturally appropriate way, I wanted us to eat together first. And not only eat together, but I wanted to cook the food for them. I wanted to provide that kind of hospitality, because people were afraid. There was so much anxiety, so much tension, that there was a need for everybody to kind of center down into something that I think in this context, and probably many contexts of the world, of breaking bread together, and I literally baked the bread that we would break together. So that kind of part of that, creating the container, and then also began with, even in the introductions, of sharing stories about, because this one was over conflicts over schools, the public school system, and inviting people to share a story about a memory from when they were in high school together, and a lot of humorous things came out, but also that kind of poignant humor that enabled immediately like people's voice to just come into the room, and you could feel this like settling down and people getting curious about each other, because as they started, they could feel the humanity, and they were also recognizing, because everybody kind of like somehow knew those stories. I mean, it like something that they could really deeply relate to, and then they were like, oh, this person is more interesting than I thought. We've been keyboard warriors. We've been texting each other nasty things for the last 6 months. And now here they are talking about this story that they had in a school gym where they felt, some moment of embarrassment. And so like, oh yeah, takes everybody back there. And suddenly we were able, really from that point onwards, we were in, it just flowed from there. So, I mean, and that was once again very unique to that context, but it's those kinds of care and intention. And even in that context, one of the things, and maybe I'm going a little bit long. Is it okay if Corey just sort of say a few other things about that? Is
Right.
that even in that process, which was at a time when the community was deeply conflicted over COVID protocols, over gender pronouns, over what was being framed as critical race theory, which is, having, a more complete depiction of history being taught in the schools, to whether books in the libraries had schools, and so many different things. And we reframed what the question of the purpose of that process was going to be, was not about all of those hot button issues and all those hot button things, but it was around how can all students in Rockingham County Public Schools feel safe and cared for in ways that are both consistent with the law and also take into account the values and traditions of Rockingham County. So we rooted it in something that was really a basic human need, and tapping in with people's love, which is for their children, and that basic human need for safety and belonging. And that created this frame in which something is a very hot, very complex, very unbounded, complex system could be held. So that's probably a long-winded way of responding to your question, Paul, but hopefully it helps to give a sense of some of the multifacetedness of it.
I'm reflecting on that process with fond memories, and was glad to join you for portions of that. And I'm wondering if there's another memory from that process or from another engagement where the fire was generative. The hot bit, actually, as you mentioned, we're not trying to extinguish it, but how can we cultivate it for a generative purpose in a way that people don't get burnt? Do you have any other memories from your own experience where the fire was really generative?
There was a lot of them. But I think one of them, actually, Corey, was one of the ones when you were there, because eventually, one of the things that we did initially, by trying to kind of creating a shared framework in which people could relate to each other and connect, we got to this point initially and this was a multi-phase process that was, continually expanding outwards. But kind of early on, people got into all the stuff of like, oh yes, we know how we can create safety and belonging. And then they were really converging on all these things and weren't getting to the heart of the conflict. So we had to almost provoke the conflict to come out so that we need to wrestle with these things. And one of the most contentious ones, and Corey, you were up, I think you were facilitating a table group during this time. It was kind of later in the processes. There was I think probably the most challenging and difficult hot issue at that point in the system was conflicts over the status of students who were identifying as non-binary or transgender, and you had many in the county. Really questioned. They were, using the language of transgenderism and kind of saying, there's only two genders, period. And others who were like, no. And, we had people in the process who were themselves non-binary or were the parents of transgender children. And we had those who had some of these, quite often very religiously framed and grounded, more traditional views on gender issues. And there was this kind of movement and way of people wanting to focus on transgender right or wrong, which to me felt like that it's not our purpose. B, it's how can you even, that could do so much harm if we focus on that. And instead, kind of getting back in a way to that kind of polarities management of saying, what if we go deeper into looking at in public schools and public school, what is the role of public schools and public school officials in situations where students are wanting their autonomy for their own identity and their own life choices, and wanting that to be respected, and families and guardians are wanting their authority to be respected. And so and this was very much the case if, say, a student showed up and wanted to use a different gender pronoun than that which had been on their school record, or changing their names. I mean, there are literally policies going on with this. What should school officials do? And I think you were sitting at the tables, Corey, where parents were wrestling with this and community members were wrestling with it. And honestly, I thought that they came up with incredibly sensitive, student-centered, nuanced recommendations. And there was a lot of passion and difficulty in that room, but they seemed to be really committed to listening to each other respectfully and finding those spaces where I think a really caring, loving, common sense kind of approach ended up coming out of that. I don't know, Corey, do you remember?
Yeah, I do. I especially remember a dance between after you mentioned first about bringing folks together, breaking bread, and then settling. Folks who have been in conflict with each other are now getting to feel like they're in community together. Settled. And that settling means sometimes we avoid that because we want to indulge this sense of belonging. So as a facilitator, how important it is to then, as you say, stoke the fire. Okay, and there are some things here we've really talked about.
Yes.
That are present.
Exactly it. That's exactly it. Not to settle into this kind of like, pleasantry. Yeah. And yet at the same time, not like provoke, just like, I mean, that's because then people just run away and they hide back in the shell, or else they just match it and it escalates. Yeah.
Mabube shared, Catherine, your courses are the one place that still give me hope, especially these days, that a peaceful transition might be possible in the completely stuck situation. And I might assume what situation you're talking about, Mabube, and I can name that. There are so many of these really stuck situations we are tied within in our world. So I feel that.
Yeah. Oh, Mabube, thank you so much. And I think also, once again, because I think some of the situations that you might be thinking about, I'm pretty sure, as Corey, I know which you are, there's so much happening in the geopolitical level, which is really hard for us to touch or control or do. But how can this transformative deliberative dialogue approach help to create spaces in the opposition where different factions can come together and create a shared vision of what kind of a future would we want at such time as the conditions become ripe, and how do we already start cultivating that democratic deliberation that acknowledges difference and yet also enables us to have a unified voice and to work skillfully together. Emambube, I so hope that your work is gaining steam and power. I wish you every blessing with it.
Thank you, Mabube. So, as we reach the end of our time together today, I want to thank everyone again for joining us. It's been a pleasure to dream and journey into what this course might look like and what this approach to peace building might offer us in the world. For those who are further interested, you're welcome to scan the QR code at the top of your screen to visit our website, emu.edu/SPI, Summer Peacebuilding Institute. Google the Summer Peacebuilding Institute, and you will also arrive to the same place. This course, once again, is going to be offered from June 8th to June 12th. There are still some scholarships available for folks who might be interested, and we encourage you to register as soon as you can so you can reserve your spot to be with Catherine this summer. If you have any other questions that come up, either for Catherine or for myself or anyone else here at CJP, you're welcome to email us at spi@emu.edu, and we'll do our best to support you and help you find the right fit for you here at Summer Peacebuilding Institute. Catherine, thank you again for offering your energy and your presence with us today. It was a pleasure. And I look forward to sharing some space together this summer.
Me too. And good wishes to everybody, wherever you are and whatever work you're doing. We know it's important. Thank you, Corey.
It's important. Thank you too. And thank you everyone for joining. We look forward to seeing you in person.